In the ancient city of Thebes, Egypt, there was a cult to an unknown triad of gods. Traditional education taught us that Amun, his consort Mut, and their son Khonsu were the Ban triad. In this video, we will see a different triad. Well, more than a triad, it is a triad and an unity at the same time. The Dictionary of Greek and Roman Biography and Mythology for B.S. Despontius, edited by the English lexicographer William Smith, mentions the following about Kneph, which appears in this dictionary as Knuphis. Knuphis, transliterated into Nuphis, an Egyptian divinity, so called by Strabo, while other writers such as Plutarch, probably more in conformity with the genuine Egyptian name, called him Kneph. See more of Khamphis in a Neoplatonic doctrine, and a Hermetic afterlife, and related topics. Plutarch states that all the Egyptians contributed to the maintenance of sacred animals, with exception of the inhabitants of Thebais, Egyptian Thebes, who did not worship any mortal divinity, but an unborn and an immortal one, whom they called Kneph. This statement would let us to the belief that the inhabitants of Thebais worshipped some spiritual divinity to the exclusion of all others, and that consequently their religion was of a purer and more refined nature than that of the other Egyptians. The god Kneph himself was worshipped in the form of a serpent, as we learnt from Strabo and Eusebius of Caesarea, the latter of whom states that Kneph was called by the Phoenicians Agathodaemon, Agathodaemon, known also as good demon, by Eusebius, being demon a creature that is part human and part god in ancient Greece. Agathodaemon, a name which occurs also in coins and inscriptions of the time of the Roman Empire, in which the god himself is represented in the form of a serpent. It was probably the idea of which the serpent is the symbol that gave rise to the opinion of Plutarch and others, that Kneph was a spiritual divinity, and then this notion had once become established, the symbol of this god became a matter of less importance, and was changed into a ram-headed man named Knoum, known also as Janum, Janum, Num, or Junum, also Romanized Knemu, Koine Greek, see Nubis. Thus Eusebius informs us that the Egyptians called the creator and ruler of the world Demiurge, Kneph, and that he was represented in the form of a man, with dark complexion, a girdle, and a scepter in his hand. Kneph produced an egg, that is, the world, from his mouth, and out of it arose the god Hepta, whom the Greeks called Hephaestus. Most modern writers entertain about Kneph the same or nearly the same views as were propounded by the Greek philosophers, and accordingly regard him as the eternal spirit, and as the author of all that is in the world. The English philosopher Ralph Cudworth in his work The True Intellectual System of the Universe, mentioned this. We have now made it manifest, that according to the ancient Egyptian theology, from which the Greekish and European were derived, there was one intellectual deity, one mind or wisdom, which as it produced all things from itself, so does it contain and comprehend the whole, and it is self in a manner all things. And this might be yet further seen throughout the Trismegistic writings. Agreeably to which acknowledgment I add, that a great part of the Egyptian polytheism was really nothing else, but the worshipping of one and the same supreme god, under many different names and notions, not only of Hammon, but also Neith, Isis, Osiris, Serapis, Ichton. We saw this god in a past video, Mf or Cneph, Epta. But here by the way it is observable, that though the Egyptians asserted but one supreme unmade deity, yet agreeably to the Orphic, the Pythagorean and Platonic triad, which, it is very probable, was derived from them. They held a kind of triplicity or trinity in the same divine essence, whose several hypostases or persons they distinguished by some or other of names before mentioned, Neith, Isis, Osiris, etc. The first whereof was indivisible unity, which they termed Ichton, the god we see in previous video, the ether, the fifth element. The second a perfect mind converting its intellections into itself, which they termed Mf or Kneph. The third an immediate principle of generation, which they, the Egyptians, called by any of the other names, according to its several powers. Kneph, Kneph or Kneph is singularly allied to Khem, having much the same qualities. Some regard Nuphis, Nu or Noum as more properly Kneph than Khem. But both these are exponents of creative force or the spirit of God moving upon the face of the waters. Porphyry, of Tyre, Neoplatonic philosopher, terms Kneph creator of the universe. Eusebius, full of the old Egyptian and Greek philosophy, saw the rabbinical and Platonic logos in many of the so-called gods, and speaks of Kneph as divine intellect, which was the demiurgus of the world, giving life to all things. Plutarch calls him the unmade and eternal deity. Iamblichus philosophizes thus upon him: this god is intellect itself, intellectually perceiving itself and consecrating intellections to itself, and is to be worshipped in silence. Dr. Shuckford, probably Samuel Shuckford, an English cleric, antiquarian, and mythographer, declares Kneph as without beginning or end. Thebes worshipped in the ram, the vernal equinox. The ram-headed Knoum is the living breath, the lord of the distributions of water. Khnemu is Kneph, and Kneph is ram-headed at Thebes like Zeus and Ammon. Khnemu Chufu, the name, is already written with the known figure of the ram, Khnemu Kneph. And the ram is the emblem of life, identifying Kneph as vitality with that of Khufu. So that the ram worship was in existence already at the time when the Great Pyramid was being finished. The author, James Cowles Pritchard, in his book, An Analysis of the Egyptian Mythology, states the following: Kneph, Knuphis or Ignufi, as Paul Ernst Jablonski contends that his name should be written, is an eternal, unchangeable being, subsisting by himself, until a certain period, when he is represented as bringing forth the egg, the symbol of the chaotic state of the world, and at the same time giving existence to a secondary being whom the Egyptians termed Epta, and the Greeks, Vulcan. Let us take a look on the following text of syncretism, taken from the book An Epitome of the Natural History of the Insects of China by Edward Donovan. The Scarabaeus sacca, sacred beetle, was held in profound veneration by the people of Egypt. They regarded it as a visible deity, but a more refined system of religious worship prevailed in their temples among the priests and the sages. They deemed it only the symbol of their god, and, ascribing both sexes to the scarab, it became a striking emblem of a self-created and supreme first cause. This insect, the beetle or scarab, was more specially the symbol of their god Neith. Footnote K. Footnote K, Neith, the disposer of all things. Sais, of the Delta, the capital of its district, is a considerable city, of which Amasis, or Ahmoses, was king. Neith, the Minerva of the Greeks, is the titular divinity. Plato in Timaeus, on the door of the temple of Neith was engraved in hieroglyphics: I am what is, what was, what shall be. Mortal has never raised my veil, the sun is the fruit of my womb. This is the veil of Isis. Proclus commentary on the Timaeus of Plato. These passages demonstrate Neith and Phthar to be two attributes of one spirit. The third attribute is Kneph, or divine goodness. In order to understand better this Neith goddess sacred beetle thing, let us return to what the author James Cowles Pritchard stated in the book previously mentioned. Epta is evidently the masculo-feminine being of the Orphic philosophy, produced in the chaotic egg, thrown by Kneph, and acting upon its elements. For we have seen that he corresponds in generation and office with the Orphic demiurge, and we are told expressly by Horapollo that the Egyptians represented Epta like the Orphic Jupiter, as Arrhenotellys translated as male-female or hermaphrodite.
It was in his masculine character that this equivocal being was termed Vulcan, and, in bestowing this name upon him, we are told that the Greeks made no reference to any other attribute of Vulcan than his character of artificer or demiurgus. But had the Egyptian any appropriate name or representation of this double being in its female form? Jablonski seems to have proved beyond all reasonable doubt that they had, and that the goddess Neith, whom the Greeks call Minerva, and who was worshipped at Sais, was the counterpart of Phthas, or the same being in his feminine character. This is indeed distinctly implied in the following passage of Horapollo. For the world seems to the Egyptians to consist of a masculine and feminine nature, and they designate Minerva by the form of a bull, and Vulcan by that of a vulture, for these are only gods which are represented by the Egyptians as having a double nature, or as being both masculine and feminine.
Moreover, the very same attributes are ascribed to the Egyptian Minerva, which belongs to Hepta, as the author above cited has shown from a passage in Proclus on the Timaeus, and from several other authorities in which she is termed the formative and all-pervading power. To the same purpose is the celebrated inscription in the temple of Minerva at Sais, I am all that has been, and is, and shall be, and my veil no mortal hath ever penetrated. According to James Cowles Pritchard. The son of the Egyptian doctrine on the origin of things seems to be as follows. There existed from all eternity a self-dependent being, whom they term Cneph or Knuphis, this name importing a good genius or spirit. From him was produced a finite creation typified under the form of an egg, which represented the chaotic or unformed state of the world. There also proceeded at the same time from Kneph, a masculo-feminine principle, which animated the chaotic mass, and reduced its elements into organized forms. This being, in the masculine character, is Fars or Vulcan, in the female, Neith or Minerva. Somehow Cowles Pritchard ignores or omits the figure of the god Icton. The Arrhenotellys, the Hermes Aphrodite or Hermaphrodite. Let us take a look to a deity that is called as Arrhenotelus. Zeus Arrhenotellus. Dionysius equals the son of Zeus and Zeus himself, no goddess involved in here. Zeus with nipples, Thele means breast and Arrheno means male. Through syncretism, let us throw this a crazy hypothesis. The Baphomet, that some esoterics are worship, maybe is a fusion of Hepta and Kneph, goat-headed god. Being Hepta, the demiurge, the masculo-feminine which is equals to Neith and Hepta. Neith, feminine hence has a breast, and Hepta, demiurge, plus Kneph, the creation goat-headed god, is equal to Baphomet. But where is Icton? The ether? The fifth element in here, a male. He might be a force of nature in this crazy theogony we are proposing. You gotta stop being so naive. The government is corrupt with corporate greed. We got serpents in the White House, serpents in the Congress, serpents in the Vatican, and snakes will snake you. May I suggest you wake up and smell the bloodshed? It's genocide, hurry up and repent. May I suggest you wake up and smell the bloodshed? It's genocide, hurry up and repent.